This is a spreadsheet I have. It's basically a blank spreadsheet. I have this first worksheet called results. This is where we're going to store the data from our user form. As a user interface, this time I'm going to use Bootstrap, not Materialize CSS. I would continue using Materialize CSS, but I've been looking at their source code and they haven't done an update for a very long time now, which is kind of concerning. And when I asked everybody what they want to be used as a UI, it seems like vast majority of people wanted Bootstrap. So that's what I'm going to use in this case. So for people who already know about web development in general, you should be able to use whatever interface you want. It's not going to be any different, right? This website that I'm on is getbootstrap.com, and I'm going to be getting some web interface results out of here. But for now, let's go back to our spreadsheet and start building this. So I'm going to go under Tools, Script Editor, dismiss this. We will be using V8 engine, so that's fine. Name this project. Call it anything you want, it doesn't matter. So the first thing we have to do, we have to build some sort of user interface for our user form. So I'm going to go under File, New, create an HTML file, and give this file a name. You can call this anything you want, just make sure you remember what you call this. I did call this uform. And as an HTML, I'm going to use, like I said, Bootstrap. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. Here, I'm going to click on Get Started. So if I scroll down a little bit, see we have this starter template. So I'm basically just going to copy all of this, go back to this, and replace whatever's in here with my code. So I'm just going to remove all of this, paste that started code from Bootstrap, and that's it. Save this. So in here, we're going to mainly work in the body section. We're going to leave the rest of the code alone. So for now, we just have this H1. That's fine. So we'll keep this at this. Now let's try to render whatever this is, which should be just this hello world text, in here as a user form, right? So to do that, we're going to go to this code.js. Now, I probably want to leave this alone. So I'm going to do File, New, Script. And here we'll basically just do a script file. I'll call this one load user form. So what I need to do now, I need to create a function to load that HTML as a side panel here or some other panel. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to call this load form. And to do that, we'll go inside of this function. We need to return an HTML service. But before we do that, let's create that service first. So I'm going to create a constant here. So if you're not familiar what constant is, if you were using vars before, just think about this as a replacement. I'll do a video covering all of this at some point, but for now, just think about this as var. So this will be my variable name. Now I need to get HTML service. And we're going to use this method create template from file. The file is going to be this uform HTML. So I'm going to just place the name of that file, uform. You don't need the .html, just the name of the file, just like that. So now we need to create another variable here. And what we'll do, we'll take this object and evaluate it to get the actual output for our HTML. So now we need to place this output in a sidebar. So that needs to be a sidebar in our spreadsheet. So we're going to take our spreadsheet app and get the user interface. Let's store this in a variable again. And then in this object UI, we should have different methods. One of which is show sidebar. And see, that will accept the user interface. And that user interface is going to be our HTML output. This one from here. Let's try to run this and see what we get, right? So I'm going to save this. This is this load form. I'm going to run this, do all the permissions. Now to see the results, I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet. As you can see, this loaded. Now this looks really big, but if I just go to regular size, this is kind of the way it looks like. It's still pretty large, but because I'm zoomed in so much, it's going to look really, really big. But that loads the sidebar. Now I don't want this sidebar to be loaded after we go here and manual running for load form. What I'm going to do instead, I'm going to add a menu here on top so that we can click on it and it will basically just load this sidebar. So let's create a function to do that menu. So we need to start by getting the UI again. And then I'm going to take that UI and see there is this option to create menu. Caption for this is the name for this menu. Let's save this in a variable. So this is just going to create this main menu here, like this format data, that part. But if you click on that, you need some options here. So one of those is going to be to load the sidebar. So we need to be able to click on that and load the sidebar. So let's go and do that. So we're going to take that menu that we've created and add an item to it. And it will have two options here. One is what that item is going to be called. And the second one is the function that when you click on it, that's going to be run. So I want to run this load form. So I'm going to pass that as a string. And then finally, we're going to add that to our UI. So that's our create menu function. Now, if I run that function manually, that should add the menu, but we want that to happen when we open the spreadsheet. So what we're going to do, we're going to use an onOpen special method here. And this will run automatically when our spreadsheet loads. So when it runs, I would like to add this menu. So I'm going to do this function, create menu. So with this setup, we should hopefully be able to refresh our spreadsheet and be able to load the user form. Let's see what happens. Let me zoom out a little bit. See, there is that new menu, My Forms. If I click on this, there's Show User Form. And if I click on this, that should show the actual sidebar. Now let's continue now by adding things to our sidebar and trying to enter those in our spreadsheet. So I'm going to do a couple of columns here. So basically what I need is 3 different boxes here to be able to enter some data, which will be the name of the item, the quantity received, and date entered. Actually, we're not going to let the person choose. It will basically just be entered automatically as one of the fields. So 2 fields I'm going to be getting from the user, and date entered will be the actual date when this was entered. To do that, I'm going to go to my script editor, and I need to add it to my HTML. So I'll go to my uform. So here, we don't really need this hello world thing. I'll go to my Bootstrap documentation. Let's go get some elements here. I'm going to go to components. Go to forms. And let's try to find something that's pretty close to what we need. Oh, that's actually pretty good. Let's see if there's anything better. We'll do a drop down in a little bit. For now, let's just do basically 2 entries. Yeah, I think I'm just going to use the first one. That was okay. I'm just going to copy this whole thing. Go back to this. And in this body, just paste that entire thing. I'll tab this in to just make sure my indentations are correct to keep this organized. So I don't really want this small text, see right here. But if you wanted something like that, you could keep it. So this first input field for me is going to be the item name, and the second one is going to be quantity received. So I'm just going to go here as a type. This is going to be text. And as an ID, we want to enter what this is going to be. So first of all, let's just put the name in there. That's going to be this right here in the label. This is just text, doesn't do anything, just whatever you want to display. And ID is going to be important. No spaces in IDs, and don't start with a number. No special characters either, usually. We will do something like item name. I'll do a dash. You could use a dash. Now, whatever ID you use here, you want to make sure you use the same ID here as for. That's that. We don't need this part. So something like that. So the second thing after the item name is going to be the quantity. So this. So again, the type is going to be text. You could also do number type. I'm going to do text for the time being at least. And ID is going to be this. And again, I have to match that ID with this for. That's good. Now I should have item name, quantity received, those two fields. And then if you look here, they have this checkbox. I don't want that. And that's this whole thing. I'm going to get rid of this. And we have a button. So the button right now is type submit. I'm just going to say add. That's just the name that's going to show up here. See, it says submit. I'm just saying add instead of submit. And then the type also, I don't want it to be submit. So I'm just going to remove the type. Just do a button like this. Let's just save this. Let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to close this and go back and run this again. So we have item name and quantity received, two boxes where we can basically type things. It's not the best looking form, but for now, let's just try to get this to work. So this is what I need to happen. I need to be able to type the item name and type a quantity, hit add. And after I do that, it should be adding this to here. Now, because that was a form, when I click add, that automatically triggered the form entry, and this is blank. So we don't want that to happen either. So I'm going to remove this form thing out of here for now, even though we could take care of it a different way, but this should be fine. Actually, I'm just going to put that back and change that form to div because we're going to need a container anyways. So now it will be just a division box, div, invisible container, so it should not close the form. Okay, so now that we did this, now let's try to get this information from here and try to send it to our spreadsheet over here, right? So what we need to do, we need to first create a function that will be able to add the item name, quantity received, and date to our spreadsheet. And it's not going to be connected to this form yet. So let's first of all create that function. I'm going to do this in a separate file. So I'll do file, new script. I'm going to call this funcs. So this function will be the function that will be just adding a new line to our worksheet. So I'll just call this add new row. We need to add the row to the spreadsheet here. So we need to get our spreadsheet app. And in our spreadsheet app, we're going to get our active spreadsheet. And we'll save this in this variable SS. So in that active spreadsheet, we're going to get this worksheet called results. So we'll take that SS, which is our spreadsheet, and do get sheet by name. And the name of our sheet is results. Now in this worksheet, if we do ws dot, there should be a method append row, which will accept row contents, as you can see. So what that row contents means is that if I have, let's say, 3 things here, so we want the date to be whatever the date is when we're entering this. So we can get that by doing new date object. So these are 3 things that I'm going to be entering to my row. So I'm going to do them as an array here. And that will be the item name, comma, qty, comma, and current date. And if we have more columns, we can just keep comma separating those. So let's try to run this function from here, see what happens. No errors. Let's go back and see our spreadsheet. So as you can see, I was able to add that particular line to this. If we run this again, we add that again, but now it should be a different time and seconds. So that's that. Now I need this to be a function that works on different items. So what I'm going to do, instead of setting all this stuff in here, well, I'm probably going to set the current date still here because we're still going to get the date. But I'm going to pass this item name and quantity as arguments to this function. So now I should be able to use that function in a different function. So for example, if I go here and create a new function, I should be able to run that same function on top by doing this. Now, if I change this to that function, another func, we have 2 right now. If I run that function, go back and check what happens, see, we add the new line. So there are a couple of things I want to change. So I'm going to try to pass these things instead of this individual 2 items. Instead, I want to pass them as an object to this function. So the way I can do that, instead of doing this, I can just pass these as an object like this, where I can say item is this and quantity is this, something like this. So this is the way I want to run this. So the way I can do that now, assuming that this is what I'm going to pass to this, now this is no longer going to be these 2 parameters separately. It's just going to be all the data we're going to pass to this. So let's just call it raw data. So that's going to come as an object, which means now we're going to take that raw data, and in that raw data, we're going to have this item and quantity. So what we could do, we can just say raw data dot item and raw data dot qty. So this way we should be able to get this and this out of here and run this function. And this is still going to be the same. So we're still going to get our current date. That's fine. Let's go and run this. So right now, let me just delete all of that. Try to go back and run this, see what happens. So as you can see, it works the same way. We're able to add the line now using this object. All right, so now that we're able to do this, I don't want to run this function doing what I'm doing right here. I want to be able to run this function the same way from the form, because the whole idea is we're going to enter our name and quantity received and then click this add button. And when we do that, we want to actually add the new line. So let's do that. Let me reload this so that form shows up. Okay, so let's go back and do this. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move to the front end side, which is the actual form. So in the form, we're going to have its own scripts. So I want to make sure I put the scripts all the way down below all these other scripts that come from Bootstrap. So I'm going to go here and do a script. Now this will be the script that is going to run in the actual form here. So what I need that script to do, I need to get whatever information is typed here and here first, which is in this box and in this box. So I'm going to get that using our document object. And here we're going to have a method getElementById. This is case sensitive. So you want to make sure you don't misspell this and have like lowercase e or b or one of these. Now we're going to get this element, which IDs item name, this input box. And we need to store this in a variable. So here I'm going to use vars because this is front end and we want this to be compatible. And I need to do the same thing for quantity. Now this is just going to find our elements. We need the actual value in the box. And what we need to create with those values is something that's similar to this. So I'm going to go back to this and just create a variable. And what I'm going to do instead of doing this hard-coded iPhone, I'm going to take this item input box and get the value out of it. And then instead of having hard-coded 45, again, we're going to take this and get the value out of it. And that should create that raw data. Now, once we have that raw data, we want to now pass it to this function, add new row, to run this so it adds a new line, right? So that's that add new row function over here where we have to pass that data. And we'll do that by going back in here. Let me close all of this stuff so I don't go back to those. We're going to do Google script run dot and then pass the name add new row, which was the function name from here. And to that function, we're going to pass this row data, which is over here. Now, these are the steps that needs to happen, but I don't need the steps to happen when the page opens. I need all of the steps to happen when we click on this add button. So for that reason, we're going to put the steps in a function so they don't automatically run. Now we want this function that I called after button clicked to run when we click on the button. The button is this button, and I'm going to give this an ID. Now that's the ID for this button. It's called main button. So to get the button, I'm going to find the button by its ID again. And to that button, we're going to add an event listener. And the event listener is going to be click. So when we click on the button, we want to run this function after button clicked. So this line needs to be outside of this function. So this curly bracket has to close before we run this. So let's save this, go back and reload the whole thing and see what happens. So I'm just going to test this. Let's type an item name and quantity received and click add, see what happens. It works. So the form works. We can type in it. If I click add again, that's going to run it again. It's going to add. If I change this to like 23, click add. So far so good. I'm going to end this video on this. And in the next part, we'll try to do some improvements. One of which will change this thing that says my item to a drop down. All right, I'll see you in the next part.